I'm Dani Gasparini, and welcome to this segment of Penn Voice. I'm joined today by Charles Stone, who is a resident of Belmont, but if I think I stopped at just that title, I would be cutting it short. Charles is also on the City Council in Belmont, wears a hat on the Board of Trustees for the Public Transportation District, and also, too, by trade is an attorney. So, Charles, thanks for coming to us. You come with a lot of expertise behind you, and today we've asked you to come on the show to talk to us about a transportation measure that happens to be on the ballot for this November. Uniquely, this ballot is all mail, so that it will be coming to everyone's home, regardless if they were an absentee voter or not. And then all they have to do is fill out their ballot and mail it in. And ballots should be arriving, I think, any time now to people's homes. So we're here to talk about Measure W. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the what's behind Measure W, what it is, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the detail.
Sure, and thanks very much for having me today, Dani. Measure W is the culmination of a several years' worth of effort by SamTrans and the SamTrans Board, that's the San Mateo County Transit District Board, to do something to help disrupt traffic congestion in San Mateo County. We engaged in a robust outreach effort called the Get Us Moving effort that touched 14,000 people, believe it or not. It was kind of a crowdsourcing of priorities. What do you want to see? What do you think would help? And then we blended it with the experts we have on staff at the San Mateo County Transit District. And what came out of it was an expenditure plan for Measure W, which may not be perfect, but it's pretty darn good.
What I thought was unique about this process is you kind of went back to old school, asking the public about their own priorities, which is a tough thing to do throughout San Mateo County, because what's perhaps important to a neighborhood in Daly City might be very different to a neighborhood in Menlo Park. So once you received all of these surveys through the Get Us Moving, you kind of accumulated what the priorities were. Measure W is the vehicle, as I understand, for the half-cent sales tax to sort of pay for these priorities that your community has said are important. The other hard part about transportation measures is the fact that you're trying to create a regional method within San Mateo County or plan, but then you also have these other regional methods that are happening, and not to be confused with Proposition 6 and some of the other statewide initiatives that are looking at bridges and toll. So there's sort of this plan within this larger plan. Tell us about what the priorities, if in fact this half-cent sales tax does pass this November, that the community has said are our highest priorities.
Absolutely. And you really hit on something there when you talked about, what Daly City residents might think is important is different than what Menlo Park residents think is important. And it reminds me of when we were looking at how to spend our roads money in Belmont, we did a public outreach session, and the number one answer from everyone about which roads were most important was mine. And that's sort of the same thing,
Right.
What's most important to you is really what's in your face every day. But what we did was we blended that, and we made sure that everybody gets something out of this measure. Half of it goes to public transit, that's SamTrans and Caltrain, and half of it is divided up into another bucket that would be administered by the TA and would benefit things like cities and city roads. For instance, 10% of the money is dedicated to going to city projects, with another 2.5% for cities with Caltrain stations to do grade separation planning. In addition to that, we've got 23.5% of the money for traffic congestion projects. And some samples of that up and down the peninsula are things like State Route 92 and Highway 101 interchange, which we all know is a mess. But then if you go farther north, South San Francisco, you have the interchange of Highway 101 and Produce Avenue, which is a mess and could use some help. If you look at Menlo Park in East Palo Alto, you get roadway grade separations on Bayfront Expressway, the Bayfront Expressway express lanes, and the thing that we're very excited about in the regional bucket is the possibility of reactivating the DeBarton Rail Corridor.
So there's some complexities in how each city will then calculate this half cent that would be either voted upon in favor or descended. But if it was to pass in November, a half cent would be added on to each city's current sales tax. So it might be different in Redwood City, and it might be different in Belmont, your city, and it might be different in Daly City, depending on what their base sales tax is. So given that projection and past sales tax revenue, what are you believing that this measure would then contribute to transportation, these transportation measures that projects that you're talking about on an annual basis?
Well, on a 30-year basis, it's $2.4 billion.
Okay.
So you reverse engineer that to get the yearly number. But for the major projects, what you really want to look at is how much money is there going to be available over time. And that's a significant amount of money. That's the type of money we should have been investing in things like public transit. $1.2 billion, half of this goes to public transit. That's a groundbreaking investment in public transit that we've needed for many years, in my opinion. Now, not everybody supports the measure, obviously, and I encourage folks to pick up their voter guide. Everything is explained in here in painstaking detail in terms of what types of projects we might see, how much each city will get. So really, this is one of those times that's important for folks to take a look at this. And you mentioned some other things like Proposition 6, regional measure, which is repealing SB 1, regional measure 3. Which is the gas tax. That's right. Mm-hmm. Regional measure 3, which passed. What's unique and special about this,
Measure W.
Measure W, is that all the money stays here in San Mateo County. We've been remarkably lucky in the past to employ self-help measures like this to help ourselves because, frankly, we don't get a lot of help from the federal government anymore, and the state has their own problems. And our destiny is really in our own hands here.
Right, and you mentioned something else too. Thank you for making sure that everyone refers to their sample ballot to really learn about the opponents and the proponents of Measure W, because it does clearly state who the opponents are and what their issues and concerns are about the measure as well. Tell me about this. So one of the things that I hear all the time in transportation is that from a state and federal level, those two public funding agencies want to see a local stake in the game. So would these funds then also be able to utilize for seed money or additional support from the state or federal government in order to take on larger projects? Do we become shovel ready?
Absolutely. And a lot of that is about leveraging, right? To get the grants, to get the help from the projects like SB 1, if SB 1 remains and Prop 6 is unsuccessful, we need to have shovel-ready projects. That's what grant givers like to see. Having this money available means we'll be able to do that. And again, I come back to something like the 92-101 interchange or the Dumbarton Rail Corridor, the kind of big lift projects. This is going to be complementary to other sources of money. It's not going to pay for them all by itself, but it's going to make it possible.
And I think it almost could be another segment when we try and educate the community about how we pay for infrastructure, whether it's roadways or whether it's hospitals, public structures. It isn't all about funding, or it can't be. We just couldn't afford all of the funding coming locally. We do rely on state and federal funding. And that leveraging, that seed money, that initial funding is so very important because it puts whatever community, whatever county, whatever city to the front of the line when they show that they've got that base of funds already ready to go and the project is designed, it's approved, and it has its original funding. Would that not be a fair statement?
Absolutely. All of these projects are scored. There's different scoring criteria from different grant givers and different sources of money. But when you have your own skin in the game, your score is always higher.
Right. So when we talk about how it takes so long for governments and community organizations to get things done, to get those potholes filled, this is one way in which we can speed the way in which we fund transportation. And things like, and as I understand through the GUM survey, the Get Us Moving survey, potholes were very important to a lot of folks right in front of their house, that they want to see those potholes filled. So this gives us an opportunity to do that or to think about that. So parting words on Measure W.
You know, I encourage everyone to vote. Most importantly, use your sample ballot book. Read through this stuff very carefully. You know, we didn't embark on this endeavor lightly. We're very sensitive to the fact that some people feel overtaxed already and that there is a tax burden. But at the end of the day, we worked really hard to bring something forward that the San Mateo County Transit District Board could vote on unanimously, and the Board of Supervisors could vote on unanimously. And that's a lot of diverse opinions there. So the fact that we got unanimity on both of those boards, I think speaks very well of the type of work we did to bring this to the people.
Thanks, Charles, for bringing us some information about Measure W. And as Charles had mentioned, I agree. Please go to your your sample ballot and read up on Measure W so that you can make an informed decision and how you will vote in November. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on Penn Voice.